Welcome, everyone, to Coffee with a Codex. My name is Dot Porter, and I am a curator in the Schoenberg Institute for Manuscript Studies in the in the Kislak Center for Special Collections, Rare Books and Manuscripts in the University of Pennsylvania Libraries. We have a lot of manuscripts here at Penn, and I like to talk about them. And so once a week on Thursdays, except in August, I hop on Zoom and I do a informal show and tell of some of our manuscripts. Today, I'm actually going to be showing you two manuscripts. I think I only advertised one, but then I remembered that we actually have two copies of this text. And if you've been here before, you know that sometimes I like to do this. I like to get two different copies of the same text because they can look really different. And these are a couple of fun examples of this happening. So the text is Ymage du monde, or the image of the world. And this was written in, it says January 1245, so early in 1245, so sort of last quarter of the 13th century, by Gautier of Metz. He was a French Catholic priest and a poet. And this is an encyclopedic poem, which basically means he was writing everything about the world all together in this big long poem. The first copy we're going to look at is LJS 55. LJS means it's from the collection of Lawrence J. Schoenberg. So Larry Schoenberg donated his collection to Penn, or it was I think his wife donated after he passed away. But we had already had the books here, and he collected a lot of different stuff. So I love to show Larry's books, and he was interested in books like this, which are not gorgeous but are interesting, I'll say. So this copy, LJS 55. This was written in the 13th century, so or 14th century. So it was sort of 1300s. So in the century after he wrote it, so not too long after he wrote it. It was written in Lorraine, France, in Old French, and if you look at it, if you just take a quick look, it doesn't look like poetry because it's written like prose. It's written from edge to edge. It's in two columns here, but this is verse. It's just written in verse without line breaks. For whatever reason, the scribe who wrote it or the person who paid to have the book made, we don't really know about the circumstances, but this was a choice that they made to write it out like prose. But if you read it, I think you'll see that it is, in fact, poetry. There's a lot of interesting things, I think, about this book. First of all, it's quite large. It's large and thin. So it's only, I don't have the record right here. It doesn't have a huge amount of leaves in it. And in fact, it's not only this text. So it has the image of the world, but then, thank you, Amy, 52 leaves. So 52 pieces of parchment. This is parchment, animal skin, that makes this up. And then there are actually three other texts at the end that sort of I'm going to say it fills out the manuscript. However, we'll page through and I'll talk a little bit more about the book. If you've been here before, you know that I am primarily a book historian. I am interested in how these books were made and how they were used. So I will point to things like that. You'll see this is not, it's nice. It's not illuminated. There's no gold in here, although there's some decoration. So we have this initial that sort of opens the text up with some pen work around it. You'll see a lot of pen work, red and blue, which is very typical for manuscripts from this time period. I hope you can hear this. This is what I call crunchy parchment. It's pretty neat, and I like this. The parchment, I would say it's not incredibly. It's not like the best parchment. It makes a lot of noise. It's pretty stiff, and also you can see the difference between the hair and the flesh side, and I love to see this. So the hair side, that is the outside of the animal, will have things like um, these little marks here, which are hair follicles, right? That's where the hair was. The hair was scraped off as part of the parchment making process. And then when you turn it over, this is a sort of a brighter color, a lighter shade. This is the inside, so the flesh. This is what we call the flesh side of the parchment. And as I go through it, you'll see the hair and the flesh sort of going back and forth. There are numbers, folio numbers up in the corner, written in pencil, which Amy might have written them, or somebody in modern times wrote these. So there's 8 and 9. I'll pause here because something that we'll see a few times as we go through, because this is a manuscript about sort of everything in the world, it has a sort of a cosmology bent to it. Cosmology being like how Gautier and other people in his time were like describing the world. And so we'll see a lot of circles because the way that folks in these times sort of thought about the universe was as a bunch of concentric circles with the earth in the middle. So here's Terra, which is the earth. And then in this case, this is all in French, which I don't really know, but there's going to be sort of the sun and the moon and the stars, right? Because this is the idea that the geocentric way of looking at the world was the way everybody looked at the world until really fairly recently. And so that's what we're going to see here. Something else we're going to see is that and it's on all of these pages, we have these rubrics that have been written, this sort of red things, which is sort of the introduction of the various sections. So the original scribe wrote these rubrics, and then someone a little bit later has come in and drawn through almost all of them. And I don't know if there were errors or what exactly this is for. Someone who knows the language more than me would have to go in and look. But for some reason, they've gone through and replaced them all. It could be that they had a different copy and they liked those rubrics better. So they were sort of comparing this to another one. It's a little bit hard to say. And then, of course, we got to point out this little hand here. This is what we call a manicule, and they're usually in the forms of hands. I think there's a lot of hands in this manuscript, but it's kind of pointing out something interesting. He's not really pointing, but I like this. He's got little buttons on his cuff, which is kind of an interesting thing to go through. So let's see. Let's keep going. Here's some more of these. I think I skipped something I wanted to point out. I want to go back to folio 4. Here we go, folio 4. So the reason that I mentioned the little numbers up at the top is because on this page, there's this other number. I can't actually tell if that's 77 or 177. It might be 177. But the point is that there's this number that someone has written up here. This was not a number that was written at the same time of the manuscript. This is later. This is, I don't know, 17th century maybe, but it's later. And then when we get here, if we look down here, you can see that there's something happening here. What's happening here is what we call, well, there's a couple of things. This is a catchword. So this is the first word of whatever the next page is. And the reason that it's here is because this is the end of a quire. So this book is made of several quires, which is stacks of sheets that have been folded and then bound together. And so when one ends, they put this catchword so the person doing the binding knows what order to put them in. And another way they know what order to put them in is this signature number here. And the signature number is the number of the quire in the book. And this number is 23. But this is the first quire in this manuscript that we have. What this implies very strongly is that there were actually 22 other choirs at some point before this one, and they're gone now. And so that fact plus the other three, I mentioned the other three texts that are after this one, the third text is incomplete. It only has one leaf, which I think what this means is that this used to be part of a much larger book, and that larger book got taken apart, and we have part of it, and maybe other parts of it survive. I do not know. But it's an interesting thing to think about, that this book that we have is not the book as it has always been. Here are some more diagrams. And as I'm talking, if you have questions or you want to say anything, feel free to put it in the chat. My colleague, Amy Hutchins, is here. She's our manuscripts cataloging librarian. She can answer your questions. I'll look for your questions too, if you just want to know anything. This is a fun diagram. Sometimes I don't always know what they are, but this one is a map of the world. So it's called a TO map because it's an O with a T inside it. And we have Europe over here, and Africa here, and Asia here. So it's like you turn it 90 degrees and you can kind of see Europe is over Africa and then Asia is over here. And this was a really typical way to sort of show it. So we have a question from Anna. She wants to know why Larry decided to acquire this title. So he was very interested in science and philosophy and history and these kinds of things. He was less interested in sort of beautiful books of hours and things like that. But he was interested in the way people thought in this time. And so that is probably why he bought this one in particular. I don't know what order. Well, I suppose he got if this is 55, he probably bought this one before 264 since the number's lower. And he probably, he may have bought LJS 264 because he already had this copy and he saw it and he's like, oh, that would be great to have another copy. But this one, I'm sure it was just because of the topic. I'm just going to show you this because this is fun. This one has some kind of neat, later, I think, drawings that someone came in with a red pen, and it looks like a king with, this is probably God, because this is a way that God is sometimes shown, with sort of a hand or a face coming out of the clouds. Could be David. I don't know what's happening in the text here, so it could be relevant to the text. Also could just be something fun that someone drew. I don't know, but I thought that was kind of neat. All right. So I'm looking at the time. We'll look through this one for a couple more minutes, and then I'll switch over because the other one looks very different, and I think it's neat to kind of compare them. Let's see. I think I have. Do I have some? I think those are just yeah. All of these have been drawn through. This is another thing I wanted to think. Oh, Amy. Amy points out that the king has buttons on his, let's see, where'd he go? He does. He's got buttons on his cuffs, the same as the manicule that we looked at earlier. So it could be the same reader who added that. I also just noticed there's another red. This is kind of fun. It looks like there's a drop of red ink. And it looks like there was a drop of red ink and somebody else, or maybe the person who made the drop came in and has drawn a little hand to kind of hold, it's holding that drop of red ink, which is fun. I like seeing how people kind of interacted with these books with buttons again. Yes, with the buttons. I like this. We're seeing this person making his or her way through the book, which is pretty fun. I didn't expect to be doing this when I picked this book, I gotta say. So the other thing I wanted to point out about this book in particular is these prick marks on the edges. So um, to get the line straight, the scribe or somebody whoever was preparing the parchment would make do the ruling, what we call the ruling. So you can sort of see here these light lines, pencil lines sometimes. Um, Somebody would come through and do this, and the way that they would get the line straight to begin with is have these prick marks on the edges. They're often trimmed off, so you don't see them often. But here they are here, and they're not straight. Sometimes they're straight. This is not straight. It's not straight pretty much anywhere. Here's some more of these diagrams. And on a few pages, I noticed, ooh, here's more diagrams, getting fancy. Here's a eclipse over here, an eclipse of the moon, I think, because this Earth is going to be here. Or no, the sun, because the Earth is in the middle, and here's the sun, and then the moon is going to be blacked out. Neat. Oh, I was talking about the prick marks. There are two sets. Some of them have two sets of prick marks. And I think we've talked about this before, that there is a theory that one of the ways that here we go, two sets of prick marks, that they can do the prick marks is using little rollers, think of a pizza cutter, only with little needles, and rolling it across. And so it could be that that's what's happening here, that you do it once and, oh, that wasn't right, so I'm doing it again. And someone, I think in this group, mentioned that that's something that's used in textiles and in sewing. So I still haven't seen one, but I think that's interesting that we've got an example here. And here's another one of these red hands. I don't see any buttons though, which is a little disappointing. So several, I wonder if these were stacked actually. Because here's another theory. We know very little. Ponce wheel or a pounce wheel, Claire says. That's what it's called. I think that it looks like even that these were stacked and then all done together, because the angles are the same. There we go, which is pretty interesting. And this is here because the next section begins here. This is where our text ends, Gautier's text ends, and this one begins. And it ends with the largest diagram, I think, that we've seen, which is basically the whole universe here. So we have the Earth in the middle, and then we're going to have water and air and fire, and then there's going to be the moon and the sun, and then we have the planets. I saw Saturn here and Jupiter. The stars are there, and out here, these are going to be the constellations, the names of the 12 zodiac, the 12 constellations of the zodiac. So that's the entire universe in one set of concentric circles, which is pretty neat. So that is LJS 55, which is delightful. It is in this this is probably 18th century or 19th century velvet binding. And who knows when it was taken out of that larger manuscript, probably well before it was put in this binding. Let's see, Yin Lu, Encyclopedia Britannica on button history. Medieval Europe, garments were laced together or fastened with brooches or clasped until buttonholes were invented in the 13th century. Then buttons became so prominent that in some places sumptuary laws were passed, putting limits on their use. By the 14th century, they were worn as ornaments. Oh, that's really interesting. So I guess the buttons, depending on when they were written, that implies something about the person who added them or what they were thinking. Okay, LJS 264. So this is later. This is around 1400, so not too much later. But 100 years, more than 100 years after the original text was written. Um, this was also written in France. The text is in French. I don't think I ever said that. And it sort of opens. This has been lined through. I'm not sure what this is exactly. It's been used for Penn trials. It might be the end of another text. It might. I don't think. Well, no. De est el Roman and est. You know what? That's the same text. So it could be that they started out and they were like, I don't really like it. But anyway, I just think this is fun because we still have this. They said, no, we don't like this. We crossed it through. And then later people used it for Penn trials. So they're basically doodling around to like test there. But then when we turn the page, now we get to the start of it. And a couple of things that we'll see immediately in contrast with the one that we just looked at. One is that this is a little bit blingier. We have a little gold. Here we go. You can kind of see it shiny. This is the only illuminated initial, but there is one. So that's pretty notable. Again, we're going to see the blue and red with the pen work. The script is a different kind of script. It's a French hybrid script as opposed to the other one, which is more like a Gothic script. But what you're going to see is it's got all of these very tall letter forms, and they go down the page. And if you look at the bottom of the page, there's going to be a lot of sort of decoration happening out the bottom. And it's written as verse. So this is not a scribe who was worried. Ascenders and descenders. Thank you, Amy. It was not. This is not a scribe who was worried about using up all the space. He was like, I'm writing this as a poem, and so I am. And the first letters of each line are sort of out in the margin almost and have this gold or yellow in it. So the yellow and the blue and the red. So there's sort of a lot of color happening. And then these descenders going down. And then these kind of ascenders. It's like we have all this space. So let's fill the space up. I feel like these are so interesting because the blue and the red is so similar to the earlier manuscript, and then it's almost like there's like new and old sort of existing together in this one place because these are more sort of modern in the times. Let's see. So one of the things that the scribe does that I like quite a lot, if I can find one, I mentioned in the other manuscript, here we go, this idea of the catchword where you have the word at the bottom of the last page of the choir going up. This one has catchwords, and not just catchwords, but they've been decorated, sort of drawn around. So here's the catchword, and they've built like a little church building, I think, around it, right? And all of them, pretty much all of them are like this. So we have both the decorations, these sorts of decorations here, and then going through lots of fleur-de-lis if you were in doubt that it was French. Now you know. Let's see. Lisa says the yellowish color used to fill in some of the letters is an interesting device. It is. It sort of immediately draws your eye to the start and then also to these other guys. So here's not only is it sort of flourishes, but we also get these little faces up here. So here's a little face in some of the ascenders. And this one I like quite a lot, like curly cues almost. I'm not sure what, just kind of decoration, just having fun. It does feel like kind of a fun thing to do. All right. I'll turn a few more pages and then I have some, let's see, why do I have these? Oh, I think there were some more faces. This particular set of pages has a bunch of faces. I see 5. So side, and then these guys, and then over here, he almost looks like a balloon. More of them. A couple more. A lot of those. And then, in addition to the faces, there's also some zoomorphic, and they're fully listed. If you want to see more of these decorations, they're all listed in the record that we provided. But here's a little dragon, letter S, obviously a little zoomorphic letter S. And I think this is just, oh, here we go. This is why. More hands. He's not really pointing at anything in particular, but it's just a hand. No buttons, though, on this little. It's like he thought, that looks like an arm, so I'll put a hand there. And more of these decorations down at the bottom. And, oh, here we go. This one also has some of these diagrams. So again, here it's the same diagram. We have the earth in the middle, and then I think that's water and air, and then everything else. And here's another one of these decorated catchwords down at the bottom, a little building. Oh, and here's a little more color. That's something that this one does. It also has these, and there have been other ones that we sort of passed by that aren't filled in. So this is the same kind of letter, but it hasn't been filled with color. I don't know, Amy, do we know if the color, if that was added later? Any sense of that? Or no? She's shaking her head. So I don't. It's hard to tell when things were added. Oh, this is one. I've seen this one before. So this is. Amy says it looks like it might have been later, but we haven't done any testing. Like it might be fun to do testing to kind of see. Here is another diagram of the Earth, but now we have people on it, so we can see all around the Earth, all these people, so we can really see that sort of circular view, which is sort of fun. And here's more of these diagrams, and I think there's more of that unfilled. And we have one more minute. I want to switch to go to the end because I think at the end, oh no, it was the end of the other one. There's a little more later hands that sort of peek out here at the end. Lisa says it looks like the people on the earth are measuring it. Oh, I kind of thought they were kings, but they could be measuring it. Here's just later. Oh, and here's more like 2 swans with their heads together. Sort of fun. And this is a much later hand adding some text there. So there we go. Thank you all so much for sticking around and for coming back. And that was really fun. I'm glad to be back. I'll be back next week with Liza Vick, and I hope I'll see you then. And in the meantime, take care and have a great week.